We finished it, got it to him on set. I went on set. I saw him and I was like, "Ray, how do you like your ring?" Right? And like he's like, I think like 6'2". He's a big guy, and I'm only like 5'8". Right. So like he grabs me by the shoulders and he starts Judah, I effing love it. I effing love it. Right. And I was like, all right, dude. Like, thanks. All right, cool.
Meddlers Corner! Yeah, tune in, let's go! Dropping into a galaxy far away, talking cosplayers and the roles they play. From the actors to the prop makers' art, every single fan plays a vital part. We hit the movies and the latest shows, the biggest fan cast everybody knows. Step into the corner, let the force ignite. Meddlers Corner, bringing Star Wars to life. We hit the movies and the latest shows, the biggest fan cast everybody knows. Step into the corner, let the force ignite. Meddlers Corner, bringing Star Wars to life.
Hello, meddlers, and welcome to another episode of Meddler's Corner. Today, I'm joined by a special guest, and for all you cosplayers out there, you're really going to want to watch this episode. Today, I have the pleasure to be sitting down with the Emmy Award-winning Juda Escalante. You know his works from The Mandalorian, the Ahsoka series, and here recently, Fallout Season 2, The Suicide
Yeah.
Squad, and multiple Marvel projects. Dude, amazing resume. Such an honor
Yeah.
to have you on here with me. How are you doing today?
Great. Awesome to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I like doing these things. I like talking to an audience about stuff that I've done, stuff that I've worked on, and sometimes some of my techniques, which I don't give a lot out. So we're here.
Well, dude, I think my first question for you is can you tell us a little bit about how you got into costuming, how Lucasfilm found Judah?
All right. So I'm going to bring this all the way back, right? And then it
Okay.
full circles as everything does. So I started off years ago, working for this costume shop that used to make mascots, character walkarounds for theme parks, Disneyland, Magic Mountain, and NFL, Major League Baseball mascots, right? So there was these walk around characters, and I was actually a driver. So I knew nothing about this at all whatsoever. My grandmother was a seamstress at one of these shops, and they needed a driver to go pick up materials and glue and sandpaper, foam, all these things. And so that's what I did. So I used to do all of that stuff. I used to go pick up whatever they needed, whatever materials. And when there was nothing for me to go pick up, the boss would actually show me how to glue foam, how to sand it, all these different techniques on how to create these characters. And as I kept doing that, I got better and better at it. And so then he actually ended up hiring a different driver. So he kept me in house. So I started learning reverse engineering. So I became basically the manager of the refurbishment department, where a lot of these mascots, for instance, Rowdy the Cowboy from Dallas Cowboys. If you guys know who that mascot is, they would bring him off season. So they'd use him throughout the whole season. When the season of football ended, then they would bring him into the shop to do repairs to him. And I had to take him apart and see how all that worked out and coordinate with all the people to bring it back to life. And so I started learning a lot about that. But then the boss at that time, he needed a in-house airbrush artist, and because he used to hire a freelance airbrush artist, and at that time, I don't want to give the date away, but at that time, I mean, they were charging like 40, $50 an hour, and this was like over 20 years ago. So that goes to show you how long. So he wanted someone in-house so that way he can pay a little bit less and teach. So he asked if I wanted to airbrush. So I was willing to do so. And for every little step, I was very grateful that he had the patience for me to ask him any question I needed to ask.
Wow.
Anything. So for any little color, any little dark shading I had to do for
Mhm.
any of these characters, because I'm airbrushing on fabric at this point. If you look at a lot
Okay.
of these characters, there's a fabric called tempo, and it's usually your car liner. When you look at the roof of your car,
Okay.
it's this weird material. It's called tempo. So we used a lot of that stuff. So if I would airbrush on it, you can't erase it. It's
No,
permanent. It's on there,
it's there.
right? So I had to ask him all the time for every little question that I had. I had to ask him, and like I said, I was very patient. He was very patient that he showed me all of these techniques. So I started to learn little and little, and I kept going from shop to shop, and I came across a woman named Shauna Tripsick at one of these shops, and she happened to manage that shop for, I'd say, maybe about 3 months. And I got along with her very well. She was a costume designer. She designed for Power Rangers, Firefly. I know there's a lot of Firefly people out there. Yeah, right. So I remember she brought in her portfolio one time, and I was like, "What? You worked on this movie? You worked on this show?" Like, she had this huge portfolio. It was awesome, and I got along with her very well. Her son was baptized at the same church I was baptized in,
Oh,
and
wow.
we'd go to church a few times, and we developed a good relationship. And she ended up leaving. So then, fast forward, I got into the props scene by a man named Jordan DeVries, which is a really good friend of mine, amazing painter. He got me into the prop scene, and that's where I was working on a lot of Marvel films doing props. And I remember watching, I think it was it was Mandalorian season 2.
Okay.
I was watching Mandalorian season 2, the behind the scenes, the gallery,
The gallery. Yep.
right? Okay, so
Mhm.
everyone knows, Star Wars fans knows what the gallery is. So I remember watching the gallery, and as I was watching it, I was watching it with my girlfriend, and I was like, I see Shauna Tripsick on there. And I was like, what? I know her. I know that woman, right? So I was like, I
Yeah.
know her. Like, I used to work with her. She was
Yeah.
awesome, like we lost touch for, quite some time, whatever, but we always remember how someone make us or how someone made us feel,
Mhm.
right? So, anyways, long story short, I think I was working on Black Panther 2. And that's when that came out, the season 2, the gallery. And I reached out to her. I sent her a text message, and I was like, hey, Shauna, congratulations on all your success on The Mandalorian. Blah, 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 blah. I'm managing the paint department over here. I sent her this like long paragraph,
Right.
and her response was, do you need a job?
Heck yeah.
That was so right. So I was like, like after I sent it this like huge paragraph, she's like, "Do you need a job?" And I was like, "Well, I'm always open, to what's available."
Mhm.
So she said she was gonna have her supervisor reach out to me, give me all the information, all the details and contracts, all this stuff. So that's how that came to be. So then I got on board in the costume department for Mandalorian season 3, and then moving forward into Ahsoka season 1, and then we worked on Foundation season 3 for Apple TV. So to put all that into perspective, that's how I got on a Lucasfilm Mandalorian season 3 costume
That's
department.
incredible, incredible. So I
Yeah.
love that story where you learned your craft as like, an apprentice, you learned from a
Yes.
master and you worked your way up. You learned about the different materials and how
Hmm.
the paint takes to those materials, dude. Incredible story.
Correct.
So when you were on any Star Wars set, what was your most memorable set that you've ever worked on in for Lucasfilm?
I'd have to say there was a scene where on Mandalorian season 3, Din Djarin, because I knew the story, and Din Djarin had to get baptized basically to get back into the clan,
Yep.
right? So I remember like I worked on some of the bow armor, worked on Din's armor, and I was on set actually at the time where he's gonna get baptized. And again, like if you remember that story, what I was telling you about Shauna and her
Mhm.
son, I got baptized at the same church her son got baptized. So to me, I got baptized as an adult, and when I was on set, it just had so much meaning for me because it brought everything full circle in the sense of Star Wars is my favorite all-time nostalgia. I don't know what you want to call it. I've been a huge Star Wars fan since I was a child, and I remember watching the behind the scenes for, I think it was Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith. There was one of those, but I just kept saying like, wow, imagine like being on that show and working on something Star Wars related, whatever it was. So I remember for me, it just meant so much to me to be on set at that very exact moment when Din Djarin was going to get baptized,
Wow.
and it meant a lot, and just to kind of like read the script that I had, and talking about certain words and certain things. I was really on there, and almost kind of like, to put in perspective, I was crying inside because it meant
Yeah.
so much to me. But I
Mhm.
couldn't let it out because there's
Yeah.
all these people around me, right? I can't
Right?
just sit there, just start bawling and crying, right? Like, dude, what's wrong, man? So that for me meant a whole lot.
Dude,
That
it's
was
like
That was a good moment.
It's like your inner child just making a
Yes.
full circle
Yeah.
moment,
Yeah.
and you're like, from the moment of dreaming to
Yep.
now being there. So cool,
Correct.
so cool.
Yeah.
So when you are on set and you're working with your costumes or you're working with the fellow other costumers in the props department,
Mm.
can you take us through a little bit of a step-by-step process? Because I know we talked a little bit earlier before we met about how when it comes to the design and then it goes to photography and it goes to filming.
Got it.
And then later on in the process, maintaining the accuracy throughout each and
Yeah.
every bit of the filming process. Can you take us a little bit through that?
Yeah, of course. So we get a lot of the illustration work from one of the designers named Brian Mateus, who works for Doug Chang. So they create these characters for us, right? And then that goes to the costume designer, for instance, Shauna Tripsick. And Shauna will decide what type of fabric she wants to use for these characters. And then again, me being in the specialty manufacturing costume side of things, I deal anything armor related,
Okay.
right? So I deal with all the hard goods, so nothing soft. So when I get to see those illustrations, and mind you, a lot of the armor that we did on, for instance, Ahsoka, especially Ahsoka, it was all sculpted by hand. None of it, we didn't have no 3D printers, none of that stuff. So, and then even to go with a lot of Mandalorian season 3, because John Favreau wanted to keep the aesthetics of Star Wars 1977,
Yeah.
right? Where everything was hand sculpted, it was asymmetrical. You know, when you have a lot of 3D prints, a lot of the sculptures are very symmetrical and very
Mhm.
even, you know.
Yeah.
And if you look at a lot of the characters on Star Wars, they're uneven, especially the stormtroopers. Look at their
Yeah.
armor. They're it's uneven.
Everything's
So
different.
correct, right? So Shauna goes through the fabrics and then we go through the armor and we have to get her buy off or sign off on how the armor looks and how she wants it to look. And then we go ahead and mold it, cast it, paint it, and then we have the fittings with the actors. And then there's something also called the camera test, where we have to show all the costumes and props to the showrunners. For instance, John Favreau, Dave Filoni. We have to show it in front of them before they actually go on camera. So they have to see everything. If they like everything, if there's any changes to be made, it has to be done before the start film date, right? So that's where we do
Woo.
everything. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of work and it can be a lot of pressure to have that done because there's times where they're filming one day and we have the camera day either 1 or 2 days before actually filming, and if they don't like something, we gotta make that change. Whether it's,
But
whatever hour it is, what hours it takes, how many days, we gotta get it done.
about how long of a turnaround do they usually give you to make that change if they don't if John doesn't like it and he's like, "Hey, no, let's work with something else." What's the turnaround time?
It depends. I remember there was one time on Ahsoka where we had to make some changes and we had 1 day to make those changes. And it was yeah, it was a lot of changes to be made, but good thing that I was anticipating the change.
Oh, okay.
Because I was the foreman who basically ran that department of all the specialty costume manufacturing, all the armor. So I anticipated those changes. So then when we had to make those changes, it wasn't as hard as it seemed to be.
Okay. So usually you're pre-gaming on, okay, I can see this, and so you're already formatting a plan
Yes.
in your mind.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. You got to be ready. You got to have plan
Yeah.
A, B, C, and D.
Yeah. I think one
Yeah.
of my when I was a teacher, I was an assistant band director for
Oh,
a little bit,
nice.
and the head director who worked with me at the time, she always told me, she's like, "Poor planning is planning to fail." So
Yeah.
that stayed with me throughout
Really?
my entire career. Even as an electrician now, it's like we got to plan every single day. So yeah,
Yeah.
just
Correct. Yeah.
staying on top of that. And that's you had to.
100%. Yeah. Oh, you have to. And this is Star Wars, so it's bigger than life itself, really.
There's always that one fan that will nitpick the costume going, "You
Yes,
see that? That's different. That's
exactly, exactly. Yep, fans are all over it.
So, speaking of, fans looking at costuming, one of my favorite characters that you had the pleasure of working on is Balin Skull. Can you tell us a little bit about the lore behind the stone and his ring. There's multiple and multiple Reddit posts out there, everyone formulating their own theory, this next theory and that next theory. Could you tell us a little bit? Could you give us the secret sauce to that?
Got it. Okay. So if you guys don't know Ray Stevenson, on all his movies or TV shows that he's been in, he gets a custom ring made all the time. He's a ring collector. He collects rings. So I remember I had to do a fitting with him, and he's like, Judah, I spoke to Dave and I'm getting my ring. I want Moldavite. Moldavite, you can only get it from Syria, and it comes from outer space, and Syria is the only place you can get it. And I'm like, okay, all right. Like, he's telling me this whole story and about Moldavite, all this stuff. So then I typed it up and I'm like, all right, is this what you want? He's like, yes, that's it. That's it. I want Moldavite. So it's like, so it's funny. So then, like, I was like, all right, cool. So I grabbed one of our sculptors and I had to break down the whole story about Moldavite, showed him some pictures, printed some stuff out for him. He created this really cool ring, and we had to make it out of rubber only because it's right here on his right
Mhm.
hand.
Right.
And, to grab the lightsaber, do fight scenes or whatever, we needed to be rubber so that way he wouldn't hurt his finger. So I went ahead and painted that, and I looked at, like, gold goes really good with green, and gold is a masculine element. So I decided to go with the gold because the opposite of him is Shin, as you all know. Shin is silver.
Mhm.
Silver is feminine element. So I painted that ring. We finished it, got it to him on set. I went on set. I saw him, and I was like, Ray, how do you like your ring? Right. And like, he's like, I think like 6'2". He's a big guy, and I'm only like 5'8". Right. So like, he grabs me by the shoulders and he starts Judah, I effing love it. I effing love it. Right. And I was like, all right. Like, thanks. All right, cool. So so then I just gave him a good handshake and like, all right, cool. So yeah, so if you don't know about like his costume, like there's a lot of that moldavite or a lot of those
Yep.
stones embedded in his thread, his belt. I think it was about, I want to say it was about 12 to 16 stones. I painted a bunch of extra stones, so that way they can embed in the threading.
Mhm.
I just don't remember the exact count of what they used, but that's the basic story of. And then the belt, his belt, right? So that's
Yep.
moldavite also. So look up that stone moldavite and compare it to his belt and his ring.
Okay.
It's pretty cool.
And dude, you got people right now going on the 501st CRL page trying to update their costumes because you just said 12 and they're all like, we better
Uh-oh.
update
Yeah,
our
I know,
kits.
right? Well, I know I painted at least 12, but I did
Yeah.
extras because I
Mhm.
can't remember exactly how many they ended up using, but I did extras because they were so tiny, you could lose them really easy. Yeah,
So
that's funny.
another character that you had the pleasure of working on was Enoch.
Uh,
What an interesting and complex set of armor. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, what was your thought process on when it came to the painting of Captain Enoch?
so painting, so basically I had to do stormtrooper white,
Mhm.
right? So I did that, but then I remember the other painter, Tony Acosta, I had him do some samples for the gold, for all his gold, right? And this was before we even made any of the stormtroopers. It was Enoch where we had to do some tests first before we got to the actual, they were called the night tattlers or stormtroopers. And we had to do some paint tests. And for me, the paint, automatically as a painter, I go straight to paint,
Yes.
right? So that's my go to. So Tony did some paint tests, and there was something off about it. I just wasn't liking the paint tests on it. So we ended up going with, a few of us decided on gold leaf,
Okay.
and that's where we ended up going with gold leaf
Okay.
instead of actual paint.
Um,
And then the gold leaf was the winner. So that's what we ended up. We had the gold leaf. All those stormtroopers, we did 40 of them.
yeah.
Yeah, that was a lot. So every little piece that you see was actual gold leaf that we ended up applying to the costumes,
Wow.
especially with Enoch. So Dave signed off on it, and that's what it became being. And I'm glad we ended up going with gold leaf because it read different than actual
Mhm.
paint.
Okay.
Yeah.
So diving deeper into your processes of how when it comes to costuming, what are you more experienced with? Because I mean, you paint all the armor. What is Juda's go to when it comes to paint? What are you using?
Automotive.
Automotive. Okay.
Automotive paints. I use a HVLP spray gun and mostly just automotive paints. They're more durable, they're more vibrant in colors. I can mix the colors how I want. They have a much better curing time, as far as quickness goes, because think of it, like when we're on set, I'll give you guys an example. For a lot of cosplayers out there, you know what a lumiluster is.
Yep.
If a lot of people don't know, that's Imperial Surface, Sam's product, awesome product. There's a process to do that chrome finish. And if most of you guys are aware, like a fast way of doing it would take at least 3 hours to do, at least 3 hours. But there was a scene where, for instance, on Mandalorian season 3, there was a Din Djarin gauntlet where
Mhm.
the Super Seas take off, his whistling birds
Yeah.
where they capture him. I think it was like on episode 7 or 8. It was one of those. But I had to get that gauntlet on set in 45 minutes, which means I had to cut out the whistling birds, fill it, and chrome it in 45 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I remember I had to hand it to Brendan Wayne at
Yeah.
the time when we were on set. If you guys know who Brendan Wayne is, he's the Mandalorian.
Yep.
Look him up. You guys will know who he is. He's awesome. But
Gave the complete swagger to the Mandalorian.
yeah, 100%. That's him, right? So
Yeah.
when I see the Mandalorian or Din, that's Brendan Wayne, Brendan Wayne. Yeah, exactly, right? So yeah, so I rely on a lot of automotive finishing. I don't like to use a lot of people use rattle can stuff like that, but there's a few colors that I use in rattle can, but it's not a whole lot that I
What
use.
what materials have you found in your career that automotive paint would not work really well with?
Wait, say that again?
In you can Let me ask this question differently. In your career, what
Yes.
materials have you found that automotive paint wasn't adhering to very well? Are there
Oh,
any
got it.
materials that you've experienced that didn't take well?
None.
None. Okay.
None.
Even on fabric, doing like a little driver
Oh,
effect
okay.
or
I'll take
weathering
it back
effect.
then. All right. If
Okay.
it's fabric, no, I like to use different materials on fabric. But if it's hard goods, it works well on all hard goods.
Okay.
But okay, so yeah, so fabric is different. I'll use more fabric paint.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. Got it. I think another question is where do you get your inspiration from when it comes to painting? You've created some amazing armor for Balin Skull, for Captain Enoch, Din Djarin. Where did this inspiration come from?
So for me, let's say, I'll bring this back. So as far as creating the armor, I don't really create the armor. It's more so the sculptors that create the armor, the designers that create the armor. So I just finish the armor basically.
Mhm.
So, and that comes with paint, right? Because when you look at pretty much any of these costumes, props, whatever it is on film, on camera, what you guys are seeing is the paint job. That's the final look, right? So for me, it's more so when I look at paint, I get a lot of my inspiration from the design of the character, the design of the prop, whatever it is. And I like to get a backstory. We all like backstories, right? For whatever it is. And for me, I'm into a lot of symbolism. So I use a lot of symbolism in my paint when I'm
Okay.
painting something. For instance, I'll give you an example. Ahsoka the White, right? On Ahsoka. So I remember I was given the task to come up with the colors for Ahsoka the White because when we last see Ahsoka the White, it's in Rebels and she's cloaked. She's wearing her hoodie. She's
Mhm.
covered, right? So we don't see anything. So we had to get with Shauna Tripsick, Dave Filoni, and one of the sculptors to figure out how we were going to sculpt this armor for her. And when the question came up about paint wise, when I asked that question, they were like, that's on you. So I'm like, all right. Like, and mind you, this was like on a Friday, and I had to come up with something on a Monday to show them some paint samples. And this is the main character,
Yeah.
right? So I'm like, all right, I gotta this has to look immaculate. This has to look on point, everything. So when I go back to talking about symbolism, so I knew the story of Ahsoka. I knew she died. She came back to life. She came back with more knowledge, more wisdom, more age. So when you look at a king wears a golden crown to emanate the warm golden sunlight, and a queen wears a silver tiara to emanate the cool silver moonlight, right? And when you look at the numbers 1, 3, 5, 7, odd, which are masculine, 2, 4, 6, 8, even, which are feminine, right? So then I knew Ahsoka was very feminine. So I decided to go with the age silver because when you look at the opposite of Ahsoka, that's Rey Skywalker. And the last four letters of the word masculine is line, Line. And what's Rey Skywalker's weapon when we first see her? It's a staff, a line, right? And then when you look at her hair, she has three knots in her hair, 1, 3, 5, 7 masculine, right? If you look at the character of Rey Skywalker, she's very masculine compared to Ahsoka. So Ahsoka's very feminine. So I decided to go with the age silver. And when Dave saw it, the sample, he's like, oh, like a patina spoon. I was like, yes, exactly. So that's what I'm talking about with a lot of my work. What I like to do is I like to go into symbolism with a lot of my paint jobs because I give meaning to it versus just
Incredible.
throw on whatever color,
Mhm.
because I'm looking at Ahsoka the White. Her colors are basically like a beige and light gray. I can throw on whatever color I decided. I could have went with a dark gray, a dark brown. She's all in those different type of warm colors, but it's like, no, I got to give it meaning. It has
Yeah.
to have meaning. So any paint job that I do, it has to have meaning. For instance, when you look at Fallout Season 2 with the Macaulay Culkin's character, his character, the Laguna Lamius, I can't even pronounce his name, but that character was based off of Ares, the god of Mars,
Wow.
right? So I told the
Mhm.
sculptor, I was like, make the horns ram's horns, Aries, right?
Wow.
So it's stuff like that where you have to like really connect the dots with a lot of these characters and a lot of the paint job and a lot of what goes into it because those details are so embedded in our psychology in
Mhm.
a subconscious level, right? So then when we see these things, it connects and it has meaning to us and we see it and we understand it. So that's what I like to do is I like to bring a lot of meaning into my paint.
So when it comes to, pre-screening and even before like final film production, how many times would you go through a piece of armor or go through paint on multiple designs of them going, nope, we don't like this. Nope, we like this. About roughly how many times would y'all go through a different design on Balin or a different design on Captain Enoch?
So, okay, so when it comes to paint, what I do is there's something called speed shapes. They look like a little Tesla vehicle, like a little Tesla car.
Okay.
And that's what I showed the designers my paint job of what this armor is going to look like. So I do these paint samples and I like to give them three options, right?
Okay.
I like to give them a light, medium, dark so they can see the transition of what they're looking at and because it makes it easier. If I just give them one paint sample, they can say, oh, well, it needs to be darker. Okay, well, how much darker? A lot of times they don't know. So if I give them
Mhm.
three options right there, they're able to pick one of those out of
Okay.
the three and then I could work with that.
Are are they looking through your samples in, like, how it affects in natural light versus
Yes.
studio light, you know? Okay, I was wondering if, like, if you're going into, like, a studio, I'm like, "Man, that
Hmm.
paint job could look totally different out in the sun."
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. We had to do some tests with the Maroc on Ahsoka because I wanted since I knew the story of Maroc, he was shout out to Paul Darnell. I know you're
The
gonna have him
stunt
on
guy,
there.
man. Yeah.
Yeah, he's awesome. So
Parkour.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I remember the story of Maroc, and he was 1,000 years old. So I wanted to go with a matte black, because Empire's all shiny. They have all this money to keep their armor pristine and clean and neat. So we had to do some tests with the lightsabers to see how the lightsaber would kind of reflect off of a matte armor. Because it was kind of some was shot during the day, some others were shot during the nighttime. So
Mhm.
we had to do some tests on that. So there's things that varies. We can bring a lot of the paint samples under the certain lighting of what they're expecting it to be to see how it works and how it doesn't.
Okay. Okay. Well, dude, that's amazing. Is there any projects that you're currently working on right now, movie wise or on
There's
set wise?
something. Yeah, there's something you guys will see pretty soon. It's gonna be kind of nationwide, so you'll see it. If you guys follow me, whatever, I'll post it. You'll know exactly what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a
What
fun one.
is what is Judah up to these days? Where are you still working for movies or are you doing other hobbies?
So right now, I am currently hired by Disney.
Okay.
And so I work for the mouse. So, but it keeps me busy. I have a lot of work. I'm under the Disney Live Entertainment, so I'm dealing with a lot of stuff for props, costumes, and scenic. So you'll see some posts when I can post them on Instagram or Facebook, whatever it is. So I'm still getting to do what I love to do, which is paint, and I'm involved with painting. I'm teaching people how to paint, which is awesome. It's something that I've always been wanting to do. So I'm still within that element and I'm still doing stuff on the side and I'm still getting hired by other companies to do things. So I'm very grateful for where I'm at right now in life and doing what I love to do. And that is to bring art to life.
Awesome. Well, Judah, I can't thank you enough for joining me today, but I do
Of
have
course.
one final question for you.
Yeah,
So, if we were to open your garage,
yeah.
what Star Wars whip is Judah choosing as his vehicle of choice?
My vehicle. All right. I mean, I'd say, man, that's a tough one. You know what? I love that ADAC walker. That thing
Ah!
is one of the coolest things ever. Cause like the first time it came out on Empire Strikes Back, and that is my go-to Star Wars movie. That I had this crazy experience. So okay, I was young, right, when that movie first came out. And I remember going to my uncle's house and he had if you guys don't know, I don't know what age range is watching this, but there was something called VHS cassettes.
Hey, I know that.
Right. So 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 my uncle had a bootleg of Empire Strikes Back. And this was when it was in the theater, but somehow he had a copy of it, right? I had no clue.
Yeah.
But I remember going to his house and like it was nighttime, the lights were off, and I was watching it. We walked in as they started watching it. So it was
Mhm.
like it was so memorable for me that it was like, what is this? And like this is amazing and this is so cool. And like that was so awesome. And then also too, when you go to Disneyland, Galaxy's Edge. If none of you have ever been on Rise of the Resistance, you got to go on Rise of the Resistance because you know exactly what I'm talking about with the AT-AT
Yep.
walkers, right? So that, but then to go with that, like everything Star Wars from 1977 till now is in my garage.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, man, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for taking the
of
time
course.
out of your busy schedule to, share your story and your amazing works that you've done. I can't thank you enough, and I look forward to seeing all the amazing things that you're going to continue to do for Disney and the Star Wars universe.
Yeah,
But thanks for joining me.
awesome.
Meddlers Corner! Yeah, tune in, let's go! Dropping into a galaxy far away, talking cosplayers and the roles they play. From the actors to the prop makers' art, every single fan plays a vital part. We hit the movies and the latest shows, the biggest fan cast everybody knows. Step into the corner, let the force ignite. Meddlers Corner, bringing Star Wars to life. We hit the movies and the latest shows, the biggest fan cast everybody knows. Step into the corner, let the force ignite. Meddlers Corner, bringing Star Wars to life.